Welcome back to MVM. Today I am bringing you a preview for the new game Crisis at Steamfall Genesis from BD Games. Now this is an expansion and also kind of a second edition of the game Crisis at Steamfall. It's going to come with some components and cards that are going to supplement what you had in the base game, as well as some new rules and some rules clarifications to kind of make the game a little smoother. So in that aspect, there is a lot of Crisis at Steamfall that you would already be familiar with if you've played that game. Now for those of you who haven't, you're going to want to know kind of how that game is played and what that game is all about. In Crisis at Steamfall, you are playing in a science fantasy kind of steampunk world that is experimenting with alien technology. Of course, that's going to go awry in a lot of different ways. Now, in the competitive mode of the game, which is kind of the basic game you might play, you're going to be racing other players to score renown points by completing different activities, exploring locations on the board, and using different combinations of cards in order to gain these renown points. Conversely, there is a cooperative mode included with the base game. This is going to have you working together with your teammates to drive off the mechanized. These are the enemy forces that are going to be coming in and messing with Steamfall. Of course, when you're messing with alien technology that you don't understand, things are going to go wrong and crises are going to pop up all over the city that are going to require you to work together to put them out. And those are kind of the two basic game modes that came in the base box. And of course, that cooperative mode can also be played solo, so you do have that solo game experience as well. Now, one thing that makes Crisis at Steamfall really unique is the cool, interesting characters. You're going to have a bunch of asymmetric characters with different abilities that interact with the board in different ways. Even in the expansion, you're going to still be able to use the characters from the base game. In fact, the expansion does introduce two new characters, one which is the Possessed, who I'm playing with here in front of me. Now, whenever you sit down to play, each player is going to choose a character or have one randomly given to them. This is another new character, Louise. Now, you'll notice a few things here on the board. In fact, you've got this track here that's red and blue. This is the character's mood track. It determines how happy or sad they are during the game. And this can move during the gameplay and allow you to cash in for some special abilities. In addition, you're going to see these columns over here. These columns are going to be slotted with action tiles, and these action tiles are going to be how you play the game. Every turn you're going to trigger one of these columns, and you're going to take every action that is in that column. Of course, you can build these columns up over time with new actions, so you can take a variety of different actions. And you'll notice some of these columns can be triggered twice, some of them can only be triggered once, and then one of them is only triggered at the end of every round, and that's kind of a special action. You can load up some special tiles there. Now these actions are going to determine how you can interact with the board. They're going to give you the ability to move around the board, collect resources. These resources could be used to build items, and you're going to be interacting with civilians, either going to be fighting against them or recruiting them into your play area. And you can have these two civilians that kind of act as ways to score victory points, and they also supplement your abilities. Each civilian comes with quests that can be completed. And you're going to see here on the board that's set up, you're going to have these 9 tiles, and each one of these tiles is going to have something different that appears every round. You might be getting civilians that come out onto the board, represented by these civilian tokens, or you might have some events that come out on the board. And of course, these are going to be different based on whether you're playing the cooperative or the competitive game. The competitive game is simply played out over 3 rounds and then one final phase where everyone can spend all the resources they've gathered during the game. After that, the game is over, you score up all your different points. Now the cooperative mode, you simply have to complete a number of objectives and defeat the enemy before they overwhelm you and you lose the game. Now, of course, Genesis is going to add 2 new game modes, one competitive game mode and one cooperative game mode, and that is what I'm going to spend most of the time talking about. But of course, you want to know maybe some of the new things that come with this expansion in addition to those new characters. You're going to see over here on the side of the board, I have an item deck. And this item deck is now being split into 2 different stacks. You have your base weapons and you have your add-ons and modules. Originally, this was all shuffled together and you kind of had to hope. Now, you can choose whether to draw more bases or add-ons. You get to decide which of those decks you want to draw from. And of course, you have your relics here. Now, when you're playing Genesis, this is the competitive mode of the game, and the reason it's called Genesis is because it's going to give you a character-driven story that you can unfold over time and actually grow your character from the start to where they end up at the end of the game. Genesis is actually played over 4 full rounds, so you don't do just the 3 rounds and the ending, you actually play through all 4. The one unique cool thing that's added in with Genesis is the storybook. every character is going to have one of these storybooks that you're going to be flipping through during the game. And this is going to offer a narrative adventure that your character is going on throughout the course of the game. You're still, of course, competing to get victory points, competing to get characters, competing to explore the secret locations, which I'll talk about, but you're also trying to get through your journal. Everyone is going to be able to open their journal, and you're going to have some text within there that tells you kind of how to set up the game and gives you a few options, as well as an ability card. So you're going to have all of these things kind of at the start of the game. A lot of these cards are going to give you choices. They're going to have a little bit of narrative text, and then they're going to ask you to decide between some things. And in fact, at the start of each of the journal phases, you're going to look at the different cards. For example, I have 1A and 1B. I have to decide which of these two quests I want to go on this phase. And I can look at them and kind of decide maybe which one I think is better for me. And they both have abilities on the other side that you'll get if you've completed them. Of course, if I do 1B, then 1A is gone forever. So you're going to have to choose that and try to complete that quest during the game. So everything that's normally happening during a game of Crisis at Steamfall is still happening, with the exception of the way that events work. You're not going to be dealing with encounters that are spread across the board. That is something that you'll find in the base game. And of course, for more information, you can take a look at the Kickstarter page and they'll talk more about that. But you're going to have this series of event cards. And these event cards are tied in specifically to players' journals. These are not randomly shuffled. In fact, you're going to be able to search for these. You're going to find specific event cards when your journal tells you to. So you're going to look through, for example, maybe I want this dangerous excavation card. I'm going to take that and I'm going to shuffle it in with a number of peace and quiet cards. So we have a variety of peace and quiets, and we have one bad or maybe good event depending on your journal. These are going to get shuffled together, and this is going to make your event deck. These are going to be dealt out to the different locations on the board, and you're going to see where your events are. Now, normally, these events are going to last just for a turn. They're going to give you something you can do and maybe ways to score victory points. However, some of these are permanent and will stay on the board forever. So let's talk about the board. It's set up the same way in Genesis as you would see in the base mode. You've got your 9 different tiles split out here and your secret rooms all along the outside. Now, you might notice I have 2 insight on each one of these rooms. In the base game, you add 1. In Genesis, you actually add 2. The first person to go to that secret room is going to be able to collect those insight. So that's something you can spend on your turn. They actually give you options to spend insight now in Genesis. You can spend 4 of it to improve the action columns on your character card. But you're going to set up the game kind of like this. Each player is going to get their starting items. They're going to get their starting influence cubes, their action boards, and their journal if you're playing Genesis. Now, the other game mode that I'm not going to talk about as much is the cooperative game mode. This is similar to the cooperative game mode from the base game, but you're not fighting against an enemy. This is called Incredible Inventions, and you're actually working together to build an invention, and you're going to choose one of these invention cards based on difficulty, and it's going to tell you what you need to bring to the invention every round in order to successfully build that invention. This is going to come with its own unique ability cards, its own unique decks and everything that are kind of spliced in there. So that's kind of the cooperative mode. But like I said, I want to focus more on this competitive mode, which is kind of where the name Genesis of the game comes from. So this is the setup here. And like I said, these new way you're going to set up the item cards, and you'll still use the civilian cards and the ruin cards just like you would in the base game. Now, on your turn, you're always going to be able to upgrade your action board. Every character has this number of tokens set off to the side that they don't use. You can choose any one of these tokens and add it into any one of the columns in your board. Of course, you can only go down to the bottom of your board. You can't go too far down or else you can't place it. Now, this is going to give you more utility and more options on your turn of things to do. For example, you can change and improve your mood. You can interact with things on the board. You can interact with civilians. You can move around the board. You'll see that these little arrows are going to show you how many movement points you have to spend to get from one area to the other. Then, of course, you have your wild actions, stamina, which can be spent as any one of these icons. Now, you still have the normal goals that you want to have during the game. You want to get to these locations so you can use these actions. Now, each one of these tiles is going to do something different. It's going to let you maybe draw cards. It's going to let you gain resources. And some of them are going to place out tokens. This is going to give you, like, for example, a steam token and a ruin every turn. And of course, these ruins are just one more thing that can be explored to give you points. your goal here is still just to collect the most renown. Now, when you explore these secret locations, you can move to an area, and then you can continue moving on to one of the secret locations. And these secret locations are going to give you an ability. So for example, Stefan here has claimed this. He placed his cube to show that he has control of that location, and he's going to get to use those abilities for as long as he has that location. So these things are going to kind of stack up, and you can choose which locations to go to in order to use some engine building. Now, when you look at a tile, you don't have to necessarily flip it over. You can keep that information to yourself. Maybe it's an ability you don't really need, but you don't want to let somebody else know where a key ability is. You still get the insight, you just keep that face down. Now, one of the other key things you're going to be doing as you explore these areas is getting both items and civilians. These are cards that are going to kind of help you, again, with that engine building. Civilian cards are going to give you better abilities, and you can have 2 of these civilians in play at once. They're just kind of going to sit off to the side of your player area, and they're going to give you something maybe every round, or a passive ability, or even an active ability you can do on your turn. In addition, each one of these civilians has a quest. If you complete their quest, you're going to get victory points, or that renown. Now, these citizens are going to come out, and you'll see some of these tiles are going to add them every round. In addition, some of these tiles are going to add item tokens or potentially resources that you can collect on your turn to spend. And these resources are going to accumulate until someone goes there and collects them. Each one of these locations is going to add something. For example, these ruins here can be explored. I could come over here and explore this for 8 of these screws, and I could flip it over to its excavated side, and then you could do it one more time, and then it is removed from the game. Again, another way to earn victory points. Of course, the main difference, like I said, going through that journal, that is a huge way to earn renown. There are a lot of points hidden in this journal deck, and there are also a lot of really cool abilities that really power up your character. So you want to kind of focus on doing this journal. That is what makes Genesis unique. Now, the game plays over 4 rounds, like I said, instead of 3. So you're going to be able to, each round, use 3 of your columns. Now, like I said, some of these columns could be used twice, but you're just going to take these little white markers, and you're going to place a marker every time you take an action. Now, at the start of your turn, you're going to be able to supplement that, like I said earlier. Take a token and place it so you can kind of build your actions. Maybe you want an action that's really heavy on movement. In addition, I talked about that mood track. Some of these actions are going to move your mood one way or the other. When your mood gets to a certain point, you can decide to cash it in. You can return it all the way to neutral, and you'll get every icon that you pass on your way back to neutral. So that's a way that you can supplement your actions on your turn. For example, that's a good way to get that fight action, because that's kind of one of the more rare actions, and you can fight to intimidate these civilians and get them to join your side. So of course, there isn't really an objective in Genesis other than to move around the board and collect the most points. All of your objectives are going to be done via that journal deck. Now, when you're playing the Incredible Invention scenario, that's going to give you a hard line objective. You have to work together and try to complete this puzzle. It's going to give you events that come into play and kind of mess with your plans. These events can hurt you, but they maybe will help you, and they can kind of be avoided. The events in the co-op mode have to be dealt with. So these are, again, 2 different modes of play, but you can take any of these components and you can take them back into the base game, and you can just play standard competitive or standard cooperative with the new characters, the new cards that are added in, and of course, like I said, there's a lot of new cards from the expansion that will replace old cards. They cleaned up a lot of text and basically give you a lot of almost second edition content. So if you were a fan of Crisis at Steamfall, then Genesis is almost a must-buy. It really does improve the game. This Genesis game mode is a lot of fun. Going through this story deck and having to make those difficult decisions of which of these journal entries you want to try to complete. Of course, if you've played the game before, maybe you know what is going to lead to which path, but the first time, a couple times you play, you're kind of making that decision blind, and you really have to decide what you think will best suit your character and that engine that you have going. So guys, that was Crisis at Steamfall Genesis. This game is on Kickstarter right now, so take a look at their Kickstarter page. I have a mix here in front of me of final content and some prototype content, including these miniatures, which you'll see here. These are just prototype versions of the miniatures that are going to come with Genesis. You can take a look at the Kickstarter page and see all the cool new characters. I played mostly with the Possessed, who's a new character that I really enjoy, but they do bring these journals in so you can play any of the old characters in Genesis as well. So I thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, leave some comments below. Let me know which of these game modes you're most excited about playing. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.